Hello there, welcome to Adobe Flash CS5 and 6, lesson number 5 on articulated motion and morphing. In this lesson we'll learn how to do the following, which is to animate armatures with multiple linked movie clips, constrain and pin the joints, animate armatures with shapes, morph organic shapes with shape tweens, simulate physics with a spring feature, and use shape hints to refine shape tweens. So let's just go on to our Adobe Flash and we're going to open up file and just going to open up our endpoint and see what we're going to do. So let's go up to Flash Classroom Book, Lesson 5, and so we're going to show you the first one, which is the end shape. Okay, so we just open up this one. And we're just going to play it. Okay. And I'll just open up the next one. I'll just open up directly from the end folder. So let's show you again. So there's the animation over here. And I'm going to show you the last animation, which is using an octopus. Okay, so that's our animation here. So let's just open up the file. Let me just go up to lesson 5, start folder. Let me go open up the start file. Now with articulated motion with inverse kinematics, what we want is to animate an articulated object, such as a walking person, or as in this example, moving crane. Now in Flash Professional CS6 and 5, it makes it easy to do with inverse kinematics. Inverse kinematics makes animating easy because we don't have to worry about animating each segment of an object or a limb of a character. You just focus on the overall poses. Now the first thing is to do is to use the bone tool. So notice this bone over here. Okay, the bone tool tells Flash how a series of movie clip instances are connected. The connected movie clips are called armature, and each movie clip is called a node. So let's just select the crane layer. And we're going to lock all the other layers here. Okay, so let's just come over to the library. And we're going to drag crane arm 1 from the library panel to the stage. Okay. So make sure you use the selection tool. Don't use the bone tool as yet. So I'm just going to show you again. Just use the selection tool and drag the crane arm over. Okay. And I'm going to move it a little bit slightly over there. Okay. Now we drag a crane arm 2 movie clip symbol from the library panel onto the stage as well. Okay, and we've got to move it all the way over here. Okay. Next we are going to, okay, let's go over here. Okay, next we're going to move another instance of crane arm 2, and we're going to move it over here. Make sure I line these two nicely. Now we're going to drag the crane rope instance over here as well. We're going to just move it over here. Now what we have is that we have the symbol ready, so we just got to select the bone tool. and we're gonna move it all the way from here, and we're gonna drag it all the way up here. There we have it. And that's the first bone. Now the base, the head of the bone is always the one with the wider end, and the tail of the bone is the one which has the skinny end. Now the bone is defined from the first node to the base of the node. Okay, so we want to build arm, we start from the shoulder to the upper arm and drag it to the elbow of the lower arm. Now we got to click on the base of crane arm 2 and drag it to the base of the next crane arm instance. So we got to come over here and we got to drag over here. We're going to release the mouse button, and then finally we're going to drag from here all the way from here. Oops, sorry. Okay, there we have it. So you got 2 wires over here. So that's the third bone. Now note that the 4 movie clip instances which are now connected with bones have been separated to a new layer. So notice over here, there's a new layer over here. And we got to just rename this layer here crane armature. And we got to just come over here and just come here and just delete this folder, delete this layer. So that's it. So we have this layer here. Now notice we can actually navigate the crane arm armature just by using these arrows here. So left, down. So the bottom one goes to the child, the up arrow goes to the parent. And if there are more than one child, for example, you can have a body with 2 legs. So the 2 legs are connected to the body, so they can have more than one children. So you can use this to go to the next sibling or the previous sibling. Okay, so let's go and insert some poses. So let's go to frame 50. All right. Okay, so we have initial pose for our crane in frame 1. Now we've got to put 2 more additional poses. Next pose will position the crane down as if we were picking up something from the ocean. Okay, the last pose will position the crane to back up to lift up the object. So we're going to use the selection tool now. I'm going to come here. I'm going to drag it down. Oh, notice what happens. Don't worry about that. Whoops. Now, as we drag the instance, notice how the whole thing just comes and drags along it. Okay, so it keeps on dragging everything down. So just gotta leave it around here. And we gotta go to frame number 100. And we gotta drag it out of the water. Okay, so we just gotta move it back up again. Okay, so let's just preview by just choosing test movie. And there we have it. Now the problem is, as we try to create our pose, it's very difficult to control the rotation. So let's try a different way. Okay, we hold down the shift key as we move individual nodes to isolate their rotation. So let's come to frame 100. Now as we come to frame 100, we hold down the shift key and we click and drag on the second node of the rotation so we can actually move it. So notice I can actually move it by pressing the shift key. So the second node of the crane rotates, but the first node does not. So we gotta just come over here and gotta come over here, and we gotta come over here, move this one, press the shift key to move this one up, and we gotta come over here to move this one down. Okay, so you can see that we can actually do this. So there we have it. So by holding down the shift key, we can move our bones separately in whatever direction we want. Okay, another way we can more precisely control the rotation or position of our armature is to fix individual nodes in place, leaving the child nodes free to move in different directions. Okay, so we do this by using the pin option in the properties inspector. Okay, so let's just go to choose the selection tool and select the second node of our crane armature. Okay, so we come here. In the properties inspector, we choose pin. Okay, notice now there is actually an X over here on the joint to indicate this pin. So now we got to come here and just drag this thing here. So notice actually doesn't move. So the pin option allows us to pin things to the stage. So only the last two nodes move. So note how the armature movement is different when using the pin versus the shift key. The shift key selects an isolated node and all the rest of the nodes connected to it. When you pin a node, the pin node remains fixed, but you're free to move all the child nodes. Now you can easily edit the armature by repositioning the nodes or by deleting and adding new bones. If one of the nodes of the armature is slightly off, for example, you can use the free transform tool to rotate it or move it into a new position. This does not change the bones, however. You can also move nodes into a new position by holding out the Alt Option key while dragging the node to a different location. If you want to remove bones, simply click on the bone you want to delete and press the delete key on the keyboard. The selected bone and all the bones connected to it down the chain will be removed. You can then add new bones if desired. Now the various joints of the crane can freely rotate, which isn't particularly realistic. Many armatures in real life are constrained to certain angles of rotation. For example, your forearm can rotate up toward your bicep, but it can't rotate in the other direction. Now when working with armatures in Flash, you can choose to constrain the rotation for various joints or even constrain the translation of the various joints. So next, we'll constrain the rotation and translation of various joints of the crane so they move more realistically. So by default, the rotation of joints have no constraints, which means they can actually turn 360 degrees, which isn't that isn't very realistic. So make sure none of our nodes are pinned. So let's turn off the pins. So we got to move to frame 50. And we got to right click and we got to say clear pose. Now we got to click on the third frame here and got to right click and say clear pose. So it goes back to our original. So now our armature only has the single pose in frame 1. Okay, so we're going to move the red head playhead to frame 1. And we're going to choose the selection tool. Click on the second bone in the crane armature. The bone becomes highlighted, indicating it's selected. In the properties section, select the constraint. In the rotation, the angle indicator appears on the joint showing the minimum and maximum allowed angles at the current position. So set the minimum position here to 0 degrees and the maximum to 90. So notice the angle here over changes. Now we got to click the third bone and we got to select the constraints again and we got to set this one up to -90 and we got to set this one to 0 degrees. Okay, so notice there is an angle indicator over here showing the allowable angles. Now we don't normally think of joints that can move positions. However, in Flash we can allow joints to actually slide in either X or Y and see how far these joints can travel. Okay, so we allow the first node to move back and forth as if it were on a track. Okay, so it allows us to capability to pick up any sort of cargo from the ocean, place it on the deck. So let's just click on this one over here. And we got to go to properties, select. Okay, so we got to click on the rotation. We're going to deselect this so it cannot turn at all. So notice it cannot turn at all, okay? So now we're going to, so there's no circle around here, so you can no longer rotate. Select the enable option in the X translation. Okay, so it shows that you can move in that direction. So notice there are lines over here to show you just can move in X and Y direction. Set the minimum constraint here to -50 and to 50 for the X translation. This shows how far it can move. Okay, so let's grab the hook again. And notice it can move back and forth. Okay. Okay, so because it's moved all the way down over here to the water, and use the shift key to move it all the way over here. So this is our first frame, and we go all the way down to our last frame, and we gotta move the hook all the way up. Over here. Okay, so that is our pose. So notice now it looks like this and it goes down like this. So we notice that the joint, there is actually a constraint to the joints, and it allows us to do this animation. So let's go look at control, and then we gotta just test the movie, and we're done. Now joint speed over here, by the way, when we look at this animation here, there's actually a joint speed. So if you go to the position here, there's actually a speed here that allows us to constrain the stickiness or stiffness of a joint. So if it's slow joint higher up, this particular joints will be less responsive, rotate to a lesser degree than the others. To change the joint speed, click a bone, select it, and you can change the joint over here. Okay, so now we can go on to adding bones with shapes. So let's open up this file here. So I'm just gonna save this, by the way, as 0205 working copy. Okay, and then we're gonna open up shape now, and we're gonna save as, and we're gonna save as working copy as well. Okay, so let's lock all the layers except for arm1. Make sure it's all locked and save except one. Okay, you gotta click on the base of this, use selection tool and select on the base. Make sure this is of the octopus. Okay, so we're gonna choose the bone tool, and we're just gonna do this. So we're just gonna come here and select this part over here. Okay, so that's the first bone, and notice there's another armature over here, and we're gonna just drag and create another bone over here. Okay, so that's the second bone, and we're gonna make another bone over here. And one more bone over here. So now that the armature is complete, we can just use selection tool and click and drag to see how it moves. So notice it can actually move the shape. So we don't need any special tools to edit the shape that contains bones. Many of the same drawing and editing tools such as paint bucket, ink bottle, and selection tools will also edit the fill, stroke, and contours. So let's choose the paint bucket tool. Choose a nice color, so maybe this, and we're going to fill the color of the tentacle. Hold on. So notice the color of the arm changes. Then I'm going to choose the ink bottle tool, which changes stroke color, and we're going to choose a dark red color. So I'm going to choose a dark red color, maybe this color, and we're going to change the stroke of this object. So notice there's a change in outline of this object here. Okay, let's choose the subselection tool. So I'm going to click on the contour of the shape. Notice there are little dots here. These are the anchor points and control handles. So notice we can still modify it if we want to. Okay, and we can also edit the bones and armature. Now the subselection tool can move joints within the shape. However, the location of the joints within the shape can be edited only when you have a single pose for your armature. You must only have a single pose. After your armature has been repositioned, later frames of the pose, changes to the bone structure cannot be made. So let's use the selection tool. Okay, if you want to move the armature to different positions, okay, for example, I want to move it here, and I can use the sub-selection tool, which is this one over here, and we're going to click on a joint and click and drag the joint within the shape to a new location. So I can come here and then move it somewhere else. Okay. So if I want to move the whole thing to another location, so I can move the whole armature, use the selection tool, and I press the option key, and I can actually move the whole thing away by pressing the option key. Now how do you remove or add bone? Just choose the selection tool and click on the bone, and then just click delete key if we want to. So if I want to, and I click the delete key. So that's how you remove a bone. And you bone by choosing the bone tool and clicking on the armature. Now the organic shape of control, the armature is a result of mapping between anchor points and the shape on its bones. The bones along the tip of the tentacle are mapped to the very last bone, whereas the points further up the tentacle are mapped to the bones further up the tentacle. Hence, where the bones rotate, the shape follows. Now we can actually edit the bone location by just coming here, and notice all these yellow points here. These points show that all this shape is connected to this bone over here. So you want to add and delete points, we can just shift click to add additional associations to control points. Okay, so we can actually just add or control click, command click to remove. Okay, or we can shift click to add. So notice add, remove, and add. Okay, and we can also drag connection between the bone and the control line. And the following figure, a line is being dragged from the skeletal point. So I can actually come over here and actually add another control point. So notice I can actually add that one over there. Okay. So we got just click on any control point on the shape, and the selected point is highlighted in red. So, and all the connected bones are highlighted in yellow. So if I click on this one, if I click this one means it's connected to this one. So notice this one is connected to all this. Or if I can click on this one, that means this point is connected to this bone here. So you want to redefine which bones are connected to the selected control point. You can do the following: shift click to add or command click to remove. Or you can drag lines between the control point and the bone. Okay, so now with armature options, we can allow us to apply easing to our armature motion. So you can choose different options for viewing your armature to suit your working style. Author time armatures are those that you pose along the timeline and play as straightforward animations, whereas runtime and armatures refer to armatures that are interactive and allow the user to move your armature. You can make any of your armatures, whether they are made with a series of movie clips, such as the crane, or made with a shape, into an author time or a runtime armature. So what we saw just now was author time armatures. So this is called continue working. We'll select the layer containing this tentacle. So in the properties, we got select, okay, and we got select runtime from the type. Hold on. So I'm going to select this one. So we got type. We got choose over here runtime. Okay. So now that's runtime. It allows the user to directly manipulate the octopus. Okay. So notice over here. So notice the pose over here, it shows that it is a runtime option and no additional poses can be added. So this is runtime. Okay. So let's go and look here. This is runtime. So I'm going to come here. Okay. So now if we go over here, okay, I'm going to just come over here and let's go use large. And notice there is a running man over here. So notice there's a running man over here. It shows there's a runtime armature. So let's just test our movie. Test movie and test. And notice I can actually move the thing when it's running here. Okay. Okay. So now we can now we are going to easing. Now the motion editor and its sophisticated controls for easing cannot be used with armatures. However, there are a few standard easers available from the properties inspector that you can apply to your armature. Easing can make your armature move with a sense of gravity due to acceleration and deceleration of the motion. So let's just come over here, collect the armature, select the armature layer. In the properties, we got select author time. Okay, so we got to go to frame 40. So come back over here and you got to come over to frame 40. Frame 40. Okay, we got just select all the layers, press the shift key and press F5 to, or you can choose this insert timeline frame. So notice there are frames inserted. Okay, so we gotta use the selection tool and we gotta move this thing over here. So this is a new pose. So now notice there's a new diamond over here. We gotta come over here to first frame of armature layer. Okay, and we gotta select properties. We gotta choose ease and we gotta select simple medium. Okay, so now notice there are different ways of easing. Okay, so that represents severity. Then they represent the same curvatures provided in the motion editor for motion tweens. So we gotta set the strength to 100. And we gotta just go and test the movie. We forgot to put the motion tween. Frame 40, sorry, so come to frame 40. And we're gonna move it up here. So now we got this one, so let's test it again. So it just slows in a bit. So I'm going to select the first frame in pose 1. And I'm going to set the strength to -100. And let's go and test it again. Slow and slow. Okay, so notice its strength is slightly slower. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to select the first pose again in frame 1. And we're going to set the ease to, under ease, select start and stop medium. Okay, so type, so it represents the ease, okay? So the stop and start eases have curves on both ends so of the motion, so the easing value affect the start of the motion and the end of the motion. So let's test it out again. Slow, slow, okay, slow and slow. Okay, so we have morphing. Now the next thing is to learn about morphing with shape tweens. So shape tweening is a technique for interpolating amorphous changes between shapes in different keyframes. And it makes it possible to morph one thing into another. Any kind of animation that requires the contours of the shape change, for example, animation of clouds, water, or fire, is a perfect candidate for shape tweening. Both fill and stroke of a shape can be smoothly animated because shape tweening only applies to shapes. You can't use groups, symbol instances, or bitmap images. Okay, so remember, only fill and stroke of a shape. You can't do groups, symbol instances, or bitmap images. That's for shape tweening. Okay, so let's come back over here and notice there is a wave over here. So I'm going to lock everything except the water layer, okay, and just have this. So let's go to frame 50. Okay, and we're going to come over here and we're going to insert a keyframe. Okay, so notice there's a new keyframe in layer 50. So now we're going to go to layer frame 100. Okay, and we're going to come here and then go insert another keyframe. So a new keyframe is inserted in frame 100 and the contents of the previous keyframe are copied into this keyframe. So we now have 3 keyframes on the timeline in the water layer, one at frame 1, a second at frame 50, and a third at frame 100. So let's go back to frame 50. And we'll change the shape of the water in the second keyframe. So we just got to use the selection tool. Okay, I'm going to make sure our shape is deselected and we've got to drag it so it goes up like this. Okay. And we've got to come here and we're going to move this one up over here. And we've got to come this one here and we've got to drag this one down. Okay. Now the next step is to apply a shape tween. So notice we've got this one goes to this one and goes back to this one. So it's not smooth yet. So we got to just come here and right click and we got to create a shape tween. Come back over here. Okay, so okay, and we got to come here and go create another shape tween. So now notice what happens here. I want to make it slightly smoother. Okay, so that's what we have right over here. Okay, so to see how the movie looks like, come here and click test. And notice the water is moving. Okay, so shape hints force Flash to map points on the first shape to correspond to points on the second shape. By placing multiple shape hints, you can control more precisely how a shape tween animates from one shape to the next. So let's just select the first frame of the shape layer. Choose modify shape, and we got choose add shape hint. Now red circle letter A appears, so we got to drag this one over the top over here. Choose modify shape, add shape hint, and we're gonna move this one over here. Okay, we're gonna create another one. Insert modify shape, add shape hint, and we're gonna move this one over here. Okay, so let's select the next keyframe. Okay, notice there's a C here, but A and B is actually right underneath here. And so we're going to move the shape to the, we're going to deselect this and move it to the second keyframe. Okay, so we're going to come over here, put the C over here, put the B over here, and we're going to put the A here. Okay, we're going to move the B over here. Okay, so the shape hints are green, indicating they're correctly placed. So let's select the first keyframe. So notice the initial shapes are yellow, so notice they are correctly placed. So let's try and test it out again. Test. Up. There seems to be an error here. Oh, we have to do shape. Yeah, okay. Okay, so notice, okay, there's actually an error over here, so let's go make sure it works over here. So notice there's an error over here because you can't see the shape. So I'm just going to remove the tween. And again, over here. And I'm going to put in the create shape tween over here. And I'm going to remove the, I'm going to do this one more time just to remove all the shape tweens. Modify shape, come here, modify shape, remove all hints. Okay, let's try one more time. Modify shape, add shape between hints. Here, modify shape, add shape hint. Over here, modify shape, add shape hint. Over here, We'll come over here, and we're gonna move this one over here, this one over here, and move this one over here. Okay, and let's try it out again. And there we have it. Okay, so I see you can remove shape hints by just choosing modify shape, remove all hints. Now the final one is we're going to simulate physics with inverse kinematics. So let's lock and hide everything, and we're going to just choose the buoy over here. Okay, so this is our buoy here. I'm going to choose the bone tool. Okay, so make sure everything is selected. Okay, before we do this, and we got to just move this one over here. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, and we're just going to drag one bone up here. Okay, so this is the first bone, and we're going to make another bone over here. Second bone, third bone, fourth bone, and finally the fifth bone. Okay, so the bones in the flag will have the flag wave realistically. So let's select the spring strength. So let's use the selection tool. I'm going to select the last spring here. Okay, so in properties we got to select the spring. I'm going to select this to 100. Okay, so it's a maximum spring because it's the most flexible. So we're going to select the next bone, parent, which selects this one. And we're going to select 60 for this. So put here 60. Okay, and select the next one. Okay, enter 50 for strength. Okay, next one, and the next one over here. Okay. Okay, sorry, 60, 40, this will be 50 as well. Okay, the other one, the child one, we're going to put this as about 40. Let's see, 60, 40, so this will be about 40. Up 40, be 60 and 100. So 100, 60, 40, 50. Okay, and the next one will be 20. The last one, the parent one, will be about 20. So we're going to insert a pose, unhide all the layers. Okay, we're going to go to frame 35. Okay, and we're going to rotate the first bone of the buoy to make it rock slightly. So we're going to rotate this one. Okay, we're going to move it, rock it slightly on the surface. And we're going to select this one, and we're going to move it slightly to the left. Okay, just go test the movie. So notice it bounces back and forth. Okay, so we're gonna go to frame 75, and we're gonna move it to the right. Come over here, and we're gonna move it to the right a bit. Okay. I'm going to test the movie again. And notice the flag actually bounces a bit in the animation here. Okay, so it makes it a little bit more interesting. So the final one is that we're going to add some damping effects. Now the damping refers to how much spring effect decreases with time. It wouldn't be realistic if the rocking of the bow and the flagpole just keeps on going forever and ever. So we can actually have a damping effect. That means it slows down. Okay. So select the first bone in the buoy, and we got to come over here to damping, and we got to enter 100 for the value here. Okay, so we just got to go down and select 100, down 100, down 100, down 100. Okay, so let's just test the movie again. And it just slows down after a while. Okay, so notice it's a bit too slow. It just stops. So what we can do is that we can just modify the damping effects. So maybe you want it to be a little bit less, maybe 50. And you're going to see how it works now. Control, test movie, and test. So you can play around with the damping effects to see whether you like it or not. So that's it. That's the end of lesson 5, which is to deal with armatures and motion shape tweens. Thank you very much. Now, pardon if you hear any buzzer sounding, because I'm recording this at the entrance of my office. So every time somebody opens a door and leaves it open, the buzzer will sound. So thank you very much, and see you next lesson.